Welcome to Your One podcast, where future leaders take on the complexities of today.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Your One podcast, episode 27, where I'm joined, as always, by the insightful minds of Felipe Segura, Micah McNeil, and Zachary Crilly. I know all of you are in DC now, especially Micah and Felipe. You have something to shout out.
Yeah, our buddy got drafted to the Los Angeles Chargers, Cam Hart. We were celebrating him this weekend, and it was a really good time. He had a lot of his good friends, his family, and his close ones, and it was a great time. So just want to give a quick nod to him, and we wish him the best.
Yeah, shout out to Cam, and we got to meet a ton of listeners at the event too. So that was great. So yeah, shout out Cam.
That's beautiful. I wish he went to, or they didn't move to LA just a couple years before, but I could have caught him. But in this episode, we're unpacking some heated topics that have sparked discussions really across America right now. But first off, we're looking at President Biden's capital gains tax proposal, the recent controversy at Google with them firing employees and what that will look like, and then the widespread student protests that have been happening because of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And as always, we will give our perspective on these topics, and I hope you create an opinion on these topics while we go through them. But first up, let's talk money, specifically capital gains. So first off, capital gains represent the profit made from selling assets such as stocks, mutual funds, businesses, property. And if you sell these assets for more than you purchased them, then you'll incur that capital gains tax. And basically, if you hold that asset for less than a year, it'll be taxed at your normal regular income rate. And then if you hold them for longer than a year, you'll get the capital gains rate. So right now, for a single person, that looks like if you're making $47,025 or below, it's 0%. $47,000 to $518,000 is 15%, and above $518,900 is 20%. And Biden is proposing to raise the top capital gains tax rate to nearly 45% for individuals earning in that top tax bracket. So basically, if you had a business and you were giving yourself, let's say, $100,000 salary, and you sell your company for $450 in that year, you will be incurring a 45% tax rate instead of a 20%, which is just insane. And then another change is that he'll create a mandatory capital gains tax on transferred assets for families, for parents who pass away. And then the third one is that Biden also proposes a 25% tax on unrealized gains owned by Americans whose wealth exceeds $100 million. So if these were passed, this would result in about $800 billion in new government revenue. So as always, let's just take a step back and see, like, how would this impact us, and what does that mean for young people in business and young people in investing?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Mr. Gavin Farn, an economist extraordinaire, everybody. What a great explanation of what we're looking at. So these are proposed tax gains, and frankly, politically, I'm quite surprised that President Biden is proposing this ahead of an election. I don't know of any particular politician that holds tax increases as a carrot for people to vote for them. Although I do understand that there's a big movement, especially young people and socially minded young people, to tax the rich and to, quote unquote, have a more even tax system. But frankly, I think that this is missing the mark a little bit on that. This country, as I've said many times, is built on radical individualism and radical free markets. One of the great benefits of our nation is that people come from across the world to build their future. It's this concept of the American dream that we've heard about since we've been little children. And a large part of that is starting your own business and having assets that you can own. And to have any part of that be taken by the government any more than already is, in my opinion, a bad proposition for the American people. Look, I understand that we are very lucky to be in this country and to have the opportunities and the securities that are available and that come with a price. And a lot of times those prices are taxes. I just don't think that I'm convinced that I rather have money in the hands of American people than in the hands of the federal government.
Also, here's another point. If you live in California with that new capital gains tax, you would be paying over 50% on your capital gains. That's just a side note, but well said, Zach. I mean, as a young person, I don't know how much this is going to influence you because not a lot of us are making $1 million plus and getting that like return in investment. But this isn't really a tax on richer individuals or older individuals who have that level of wealth, have that level of savings, and then, cash out at the end. So I don't know. I think you have to go back though a little bit and look at this more as why are they trying to raise this money? And I think a big reason for that is they're arguing that it will be used to cut the deficit. But I think that's such a ridiculous argument because the moment they get that money, they're just going to spend it on something else. I have no trust in the federal government to use that money to really cut the deficit when they spend $4 trillion a year already.
Yeah, great points, both of you. I think my major qualm about it is related to startup and innovation. I think that's what has gotten the United States to be the hegemonic power it is like you said, radical individuals and radical free markets act. When you cut innovation, that's a problem because that's gotten us to where we are, right? So if there's an idea that your startup investment capital to founders is effectively almost going to be cut in half as that company continues to produce revenue and then eventually profits, that being the hope, to take away from that and for that to almost be 50% would be quite insane. So that's my biggest qualm about it.
Yeah, I mean, Felipe, that is unfortunate news. California getting taxed because that is where I am. But honestly, I think about it in like our perspective. If you had a company that you wanted to sell in 5 years for $1 million plus, you're making what? If you have any salary and then plus that $1 million, that's going to be whatever your federal income tax rate is, and then that tax of the sale, which is 45%. So that's $450,000 you're just giving away. And
that's
that
not even
limits the
including
ability to invest in real estate after, in long-term investments. Like, that is where I see it from.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't
that
be.
is,
Oh, sorry. It wouldn't be
go
stimulative.
ahead.
It wouldn't help the economy. We wouldn't be able to invest in companies. Almost quite people would avoid it, and that just makes no sense. I think the point that Felipe ended on like we're trying to figure out something. It's either going to be taxes or we're going to have to increase productivity. And if you're going to cut people's investments along the way, that's going to be a huge problem.
Mm-hmm. And I do see it from a perspective of like your ability to move up and that being kind of capped at a ceiling. Because if you can't sell a business, like what a great achievement, and then you just get a leg cut off, that makes no sense.
That's a great point, and I have two more points too. On Wednesday, President Biden tweeted that he plans to let the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expire. And what that is that lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21% and had individual tax cuts up to 4%, a cap on state and local taxes, increased child tax credits, and some other things. So what are we talking about here? This is my second point. When I was in school in economics class, they were teaching modern monetary theory, which essentially the thesis there is there should be no cap on government spending. Government spending should not be restrained based off of the worry for national debt. okay, if we're not gonna stop spending based off of the worry for national debt, tell me why we would raise taxes under the assumption of paying off that same national debt. This makes zero sense to me, in the sense that the government has been spending money left, right, and center. We've heard people that we look up to, like David Friedberg on the All In podcast, talking about this time on end. And it's not a sexy topic. It's not a topic that usually gets people very motivated. But if the government is going to be spending this money anyways, and if there's, in my opinion, somewhat wacky monetary policy that says it doesn't even matter, don't worry about it, just spend it all, then why would we ever take money out of the hands of individuals that could be used to building the economy to support this loony spending?
But we're sending it to Ukraine. We're sending it to Palestine. We're doing all of these amazing investments across the world.
Which is almost like, fine, these are two things. If our government has shown that they would like to spend a lot of money, right? There's arguments that are made there that that's how we hold our position as a world superpower. Okay, that's fine. But if you're gonna do that, you cannot at the same time be taking money out of the back pocket of the American people. Because if you're going to depend on this modern monetary policy and modern monetary theory that it doesn't matter, that the national debt doesn't matter because we're such a superpower and nobody can call us for our debts, then go with that and spend your money. I'm not saying that I agree with that. Frankly, I think that it's kind of a lark, and I don't understand. I've heard no true economist be able to explain it clearly. But to have those two things at the same time is ridiculous.
Agreed. And for all of our listeners, that was sarcasm. I think the extent we're invested into Ukraine is absolutely insane. But now let's switch gears here to a different kind of controversy. So over at Google, a storm brewed over basically principles and protests, and Google's recent Project Nimbus is a $1.2 billion contract where the protesters are claiming that this contract will make it easier for the Israeli government to surveil Palestinians and force them off their land. So some information around the ongoing war with Israel and Palestine. Since October 7th attack by Hamas, a group of 20 to 25,000 Palestinians that killed 1,200 people, more than 34,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza, including 14,000 children and 9,700 women. So my question to you, knowing all of this, do you think politics belongs in business? And where is that line drawn? Like, where is it acceptable to introduce?
I think if a business wants to get political, I actually don't think that that's too big of an issue overall. Here's a counterexample. You think of Patagonia. They decided to not sell vests to VCs and private equity, which was very popular at the time, or at least they didn't. You can buy them, but you can't buy them branded with your company logo on it. And so they made that decision to only give those to, I think it was NGOs or certain profiles of companies based on environmental standards. And I think that's their prerogative to do so. I think we've looked at a couple of different CEOs. Mattson at Red Bull is kind of, I don't know how political he was, but he did kind of build this culture that almost felt like it could get political and it wouldn't be too far off. So I don't know, if a company wants to get political, that's okay. But I do think at Google, I think that protest is a very small minority of employees. And I think Google probably made the right decision in just laying off those people, right? So.
And for context, it was about 50 employees that were fired. But I do think about this in the same way you think about all of these different industries, right? Like sports, or, I mean, for example, Google. As these companies and as these people get more and more popular, just the more influence it will have. And now it seems like Google employees, or Google as a name, is so influential. You see that in the news with a news topic, then it could carry some weight. So that's probably what people are thinking. But I agree with you, Felipe. Like, I don't think that is where it belongs.
I think the question is different though. Should employees of corporations be political? I think that's the case as relates to Google. And for those individuals, you have to pay the consequences. If you want to be political, sure, right? I think I do agree with Felipe that if corporations would or firms or companies want to be political, you have to bear the consequences of being political. Whereas for employees, I think it's totally separate. Especially Google employees, you're highly compensated to do a job, and that job is to uphold that of shareholders, the company, and the company's bottom line. Full stop. Right? If you want to be political, go ahead. You're just going to have to bear the consequences. And I think that's what these individuals that you mentioned had to.
Have
Yes.
you? Oh,
I was going to
yeah.
say, I agree with, and I think that this is a turning of the tides in a sense where Google, among the other big tech companies, have been playing this game of being political. These guys have spoken up during past protest movements, during different, they've commented quite heavily, either implicitly or explicitly on social issues. And it now seems like they're taking a step back and they're taking more of the Brian Armstrong and Coinbase approach where they're saying, hey, you know what? This isn't a place for that. And they didn't say this straight up, but I think that they're saying it implicitly and firing these people where maybe they're exiting the political game and focusing on the business game, which, in my opinion, will drive more revenue or more value to shareholders because that's what they're in the business to do anyways, is to make money, not to play politics. And that's for the companies that do choose to play politics. For the ones that don't want to play politics and are there to do business, I think that this, among other things, sends a clear message, which is you are at your job to work. If you want to protest, yes, more power to you. That is your right. Do that on your own time.
No, I just wanted to add on that, Zach, you brought up Brian Armstrong, but I think he was that first major CEO of a Fortune 500 company to kind of buck the trend of fighting back against the employees. And there's a wonderful interview where he basically said, he told everyone, hey, this is our mission. We made the mistake of what other major tech companies in Silicon Valley had been doing, which is giving open mics to employees to kind of air their grievances. He said, we have a mission to bring blockchain to everyone. If that's not the mission that you want to be a part of, okay. And again, every company has a prerogative. Maybe if the company is like a water provider and doesn't want to give access to certain groups of people, okay, that is like a very different edge case scenario. But yeah, in a competitive market, sure. I mean, employees can get political, but I think CEOs have to do a better job of just saying what the values are and sticking to them, right?
And I think the touch point of this is the tech industry, which a lot of those companies are the most public facing nowadays. But I mean, let's look at some other, you never hear about any problems for people talking politics in the trucking industry or in the logistics industry or in at Chick-fil-A or Walmart. So it really is these tech companies that get a lot of PR for their day-to-day inner workings that are the touch point for this. And you're right that Coinbase was really the first one in that high-tech world to take a stand on this. And it seems with Google that this is the canary in the coal mine of more people, more high-tech businesses are going to move in this direction of focusing on what they do best, which is business and delivery products.
It is an interesting dynamic though, because in the past, Google, Instagram, Facebook, they all had political connections. Like in the Twitter files, Elon Musk released that all of these companies had these investments to change public opinion on certain topics. So I wonder if that was in the employees' minds of like, hey, if they're funding these social issues that the everyday American is going to see, and it's almost like brainwashing us through social media, then why can't I protest against that issue?
That's a great point, Gavin. And the answer, yes, you can, but you're going to have to bear the consequences. That's the best way to sum it up. But that's a great point.
Sure.
Show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. Charlie Munger. Yeah, do that. But if employees want to get political,
You just have to pay the consequences. Same thing for corporations. So
Yeah, and same thing for student protests. In a similar vein, students are protesting the same issue. So these protests have occurred in schools across the country, like colleges in Boston, California, Arizona, and Indiana. And they are basically asking for the universities to cut financial ties to Israel and Israeli companies. And they haven't really seen much success yet, as no investments have been pulled and a number of arrests have been made. But we do want to take a step back here and look at recent and past student protests and their resulting impact. So in 2018, after the Parkland shooting at a high school, there were countrywide protests that raised national awareness about gun violence, led to Florida, the state, raising the minimum age to purchase a firearm. And then in the 1960s, there were sit-ins at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University that helped in the creation of the Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So definitely big changes there. But while there's positive outcomes, there's also negative ones. An instance at Kent State University in 1970, where protest against the expansion of the Vietnam War into Cambodia led to the Ohio National Guard opening fire and killing 4 students, which also did not cause much legislative change either, and just basically instilled fear in students that wanted to protest. So where do you think this instance lies, and what do you think will come of this student protest as it's going on literally right now?
I got a couple of things. So bear with me. Um, Firstly, free speech is our First Amendment, and it is for a reason. Protesting is something that's within your First Amendment, right? Free speech is so important to making this country what it is. Let's. There's nothing wrong with protesting, and you look to '68 in Kent State. Those people were fighting over Vietnam War, civil rights, women's rights, but they had skin in the game, and they had to bear the consequences for the opinions that they bared. And I think that's very important for looking at it now. The problem that I have with protests now, nothing about the protesting, but you shouldn't be disenabling students from getting to class, safe, it's nonviolent, and just start from. Um, that's my first thought.
Zach, what do you think here?
Yeah, regardless of my personal opinions, I am fully in support of nonviolent student protests, and I think that you have to be as an honest American, again, irregardless of whether you believe in the cause or not. And to your point, yes, students historically and young people historically, throughout history, not even American history, but preceding American history, have been the ones to lead revolutions and have been the ones to lead protest movements and movements of change. Do they always lead to legislative differences? No. Can they help shift the cultural landscape? 100%. You mentioned Kent State as somewhat of a negative consequence of a protest. Yes, 4 people lost their life, 9 people got injured, most certainly. But I think that did a big thing to change the opinion of the Vietnam War in the mind of the average American, because all of a sudden you go from, yes, I support our military no matter what, I support our president and our government no matter what, to hold on a second. I don't want to be on the side of the guys that are shooting kids for speaking up against this. That's too far. And the largest 2 protest movements that have been led by students in American history have been against the Vietnam War and for civil rights. Do I think that this is in the same bucket as those? I don't. I think that it's a fundamentally different issue, but I 100% support nonviolent protest in any form, especially from idealistic young people that are driven by making what they think is a better world, irregardless of whether I agree with them or not.
Yeah. I just like to highlight also, and this could be a hot take, but usually when you see someone protest, you should probably look at it with skepticism, because more often than not, it achieves nothing, right? So like they might be missing a part of the story or something, right? But yeah, of course, I think Tucker Carlson has been a big proponent of this, and this is something that I just find really interesting and agree with is free speech is so important because it's the right to actually think. If you can't say something and talk to other people and bounce the idea off of them without consequence, being in this like free area to speak, then you don't have the right to think and you don't have the right to actually be your own human who can contribute to society in a way, right? So we should protect people's right to protest, but we should also take it with a grain of salt because it might not always be right. And if you go outside of the White House, I live in DC, Micah, Zach, I mean, we're all from the DMV area. If you walk outside the White House, there's always a protest for something that, like, and usually sometimes it's kind of weird. So yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think perfectly. I mean, those cases 68 were very, there was a right side. I mean, most people would probably agree that there's probably a right side to a lot of these things. Whereas this situation, there's a lot of nuance, right? And with nuance, you need to be skeptical, like you said, Felipe, and not just believe what you just read or what headline. You should be skeptical, and that's very important for free speech. So, again, protesting is good, but have the right reasons, have the information to back it up, and be skeptical of what you think and be able to falsify what you originally thought. But yeah,
Yeah, and my thought here is like we always talk about valuations of companies or land or something of, it's only worth how much people are willing to pay for it. And it's similar towards a political protest or political ideology. It's like that idea is only worth the amount of thought power behind it. So if students are leading these aimless protests that really have no end to it, then it probably won't get a lot of thought power behind it. It will probably not lead to anything. So to Felipe, to your point, like those one protests that really seem pointless and probably aren't smart, most likely are the ones that won't get a lot of attention. But if that, for example, this one, it could because it's impacting a lot of people, like there's a lot of cultural issues here, but still, who knows which is the right side.
And I think that there's almost two conversations here. One is what is the most effective way that one can affect legislation and policy on a topic that they care about. And certainly protest is a tool in that toolkit. Is it always the most effective tool? No. But I think that protest is a very powerful tool for social cohesion. And something that I listened to about these college student protests was, hey, look, a lot of these kids have been the victim of COVID lockdowns where they've been hyper isolated and not felt that sense of community. And now they have an opportunity to rally behind a common cause with their fellow students, their peers, and to lock in arms and stand up for something that they may believe in. And frankly, I've taken part in many protests, and I find them to be exhilarating. I mean, there's nothing more exciting than being surrounded with a group of people that believe wholeheartedly in something and feel like they are voicing their opinion. It's really an inspiring and engaging thing and a hallmark of our freedoms in this country.
That's beautiful. Well, I think that's a great place to stop it. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast and let us know what you think on these topics. But we had a great time and have a great rest of your Sunday evening and rest of your week. We'll catch you next time.